Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Phil Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football.
Seahawks fans, welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers, and here to talk draft strategy. Last show, we did our mock draft 4.0. We kind of went through the draft. This time, we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about what the Seahawks might do at each position that they draft at, why they might move up or why they move back, why they're looking at certain players in certain spots, etc. Welcome in.
Yeah, so this will hopefully be a fun show. People will say the Seahawks always move back. It's not actually always true. They've moved up, not early in round one, when I think most people would like them to because there's a player they really, really like there. But they moved up to get Tyler Lockett. They moved up to get, some other guys as the draft goes through, usually in rounds 2 and 3. If there's someone who they target, they will go get them.
They moved up for DK Metcalf.
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
And so they will move up to go get a guy. If it's a target and they see them falling far enough, they'll be like, all right, let's move up and get them. And the Seahawks have, with all their picks they've got, and their perchance for moving down in early in round one, they're going to have even more. That's a lot of ammunition to move back up into a position to get a certain guy if they want him.
They've got 10 picks in this draft, Keith. That's starting at number 5. And they've come out, more than one occasion and said, we just don't get a chance to draft this high that often, obviously. And there's a lot of players up there we like. Let's talk about pick number 5 for Seattle. And let's start with maybe the easiest answer. Is there a player that the Seahawks would move up for from this spot?
I don't think there is, simply because they would need a partner. Arizona, I doubt, will give Seattle their quarterback of the future at 3. And everyone else.
There's been talk about Houston possibly.
Oh man, I would have a hard time believing that, just because of they're so quarterback needy. And I mean, you really think Davis Mills is the answer there?
I don't, but they could ride him another year if they wanted to reach the 2024 draft, where there are 2 or 3 quarterbacks that look every bit as good as this class. Mm-hmm. And they could definitely be up there again. They've got a defensive minded coach in D'Amico Ryans. They may elect to go defensive player. If Seattle wants to come up to 2, give them a ransom, drop back to 5, they could still have one of Will Anderson or Jalen Carter on the board, or Tyree Wilson if they like him. So there are some options there, and potentially something that would move them off 2, but not likely.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason I see Seattle move off 2 is if Carolina goes Young at 1 and CJ Stroud's there, and they're like, you know what, let's do it.
He would be the guy.
He would be the one guy they would move up for, but I still don't see them doing it, even if he is there. John Schneider will let the draft come to him, and he'll be there at 5.
There are scenarios, though, at 5, Keith. Let's talk about 5. There are scenarios where CJ Stroud's off the board, where Richardson's off the board, where Will Anderson's off the board, and let's just say Levis is off the board. And you've got a situation where the only remaining players that would even be potentially picked at 5 would be Bryce Young, Christian Gonzalez, Tyree Wilson,
Jalen Carter.
And so you've got a less than optimal situation for Seattle there at that point. Let's talk about the less than optimal situation at 5 if Seattle is faced with those players available, what do?
Well, if that's the group, somebody like Atlanta is going to want Young, and you trade back with Atlanta, you get some extra ammunition for later in the draft, and you let them have Young, because I don't believe in Young as an NFL quarterback because of his size. And can he play? Absolutely. But you look at what Arizona's gone through with their quarterback, who's of a similar stature but more athletic and still can't stay healthy. And that's kind of what I think you're getting into if you go the Bryce Young route. And I would prefer if Seattle didn't do that.
Yeah.
So,
and what do you think about other prospects like Gonzalez or Tyree Wilson at 5 if Seattle is pressed to make those picks?
Willson isn't really a scheme fit for Seattle. He's a 4-3 defensive end.
That's very true.
He doesn't, and basically he's like Daryl Taylor, where he's not, he doesn't play moving backwards in coverage and doing the outside linebacker things well enough to justify that, but he also isn't big enough to come up and play the 5 tech in a 3-4 scheme. So he's kind of a guy without a position in this defense, and that's what Tyree Wilson would be for Seattle. So I don't like that. Gonzalez is a really high-end, like elite prospect, but Seattle taking a corner at 5 when they've never taken a corner before, around like late in round 3 is the earliest they've taken a corner, even if it's a guy that can be really good. I don't see that Pete Carroll valuing any one player there when Michael Jackson did a great job last year.
And then you've got Carter, which is obviously potentially off the board. Now they're going to do their due diligence. I guarantee you they're working on it. Like, he's in play still, but we just don't know. It seems from an outside perspective, outside observer, that he would be off their board, but you just don't know, because those interviews are crucial, and all the things we talked about, not just the accident situation, but the way that he showed up to the combine, the way that he had his pro day, major red flags to an outside observer again. Now there could be some inside information there that paints a different picture. We just don't know.
Frank Clark comes to mind, though. Most people thought that Frank Clark was not on Seattle's draft board at all. And they went and got him. Now, part of the reason why they went and got him was because he was a top 10 talent available in round 2 because of all of his off-field stuff. And so it's like, yeah, it was, not a popular pick for obvious reasons for his off-field stuff, but you were still getting an elite player in round 2 instead of round 1. Now you're talking about taking a guy at 5.
Okay. So let's talk about trading down. You mentioned a trade down with Atlanta to 8. If we do that trade, what can we expect in return, compensation wise, and who's available at that spot that we would take?
So if you trade down to 8, you're looking at guys that, as far as compensation, you're looking at a 2nd round pick to move down those 3 spots. And so an extra pick in the top 50.
Or that's 60, top 60. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's highly valuable. As far as moving down into that range, you're looking at, maybe a Joey Porter Jr. at cornerback, which again, if you move down, so you get an extra pick. And so then taking the cornerback isn't as it doesn't hurt as much. Lucas Van Ness, who's, one of your defensive ends, the guy that we said that Tyree Wilson wasn't because he wasn't big enough for. Maybe you're moving down to piss off every Seahawk fan ever and get Bijan Robinson, the running back out of Texas.
That would be crazy, but according to everybody, and use your own eyes, he's the best prospect on the board, maybe at that spot. What if a guy like that you passed on earlier, Jalen Carter, for obvious reasons, now you picked up a 2nd round value and he's sitting there at 9? Does that make it any different?
It does, because the Malik McDowell situation is a great context for looking at this with Seattle, where they took a guy that they knew had some off-field stuff, but his on-field play was enough to overlook it. And then it burned them because he got in that accident and ended up losing like 40 pounds and, was never played it down for Seattle. If you move down and you get another pick in the top 55, you can take a guy like Jalen Carter and not feel like it's a complete waste if he washes out, because you've got the other player that you picked too. And so it ends up making more sense because you can still get something out of, that number 5 draft pick, because you got both him and another player now. And so I think it does give you the ability to take a little bit more of a risk because you've got basically that other pick is like a fallback. You won't just be losing out on everything like they did with Malik McDowell.
So to me, there's a couple of wildcard picks. If we do that, say we drop, into the 9 to 11 range, there are some players like Peter Skoronski that's listed as a tackle that Seattle might view as a guard, a perfect fit at a right guard, for example. It's slightly early to take a guard in the draft, but again, if you've picked up some capital, they might be able to do that. That's one of the positions that you might look at. Wide receiver, Njigba is there, Quentin Johnson. Another name I'll mention that I think they would be enamored with would be Nolan Smith, the edge player out of Ohio State. Slightly early to take him, but when you're looking for a player and he's going to be in that range and they value, their big board says these players, there's 15 players that they've got first round grades on. He's one of them. They'd go get him.
Yeah. Another player that if they move back into that range that I think would surprise a lot of Seahawks fans if they took, but I believe would be in play would be Quentin Johnson, the wide receiver out of TCU at 6'3", with incredible downfield speed. Basically he's, DK Metcalf Jr. And that's not a downgrade on him because Metcalf is like huge, but basically he's an elite tall receiver with incredible long speed and great hands. In my mind, the best receiver in this draft class. And to put him opposite Metcalf, move Lockett into the slot, and just have those 3 options would be incredible for Geno Smith in the offense. So if they move down into that range, that might be the pick.
Yeah. Everyone's thinking Seattle's going to go defensive line here because that's where the obvious need is. That's where the most improvement we're looking for is in the offseason. But we don't have a third wide receiver. We don't have a third wide receiver. Tyler Lockett's not getting any younger. Love Tyler Lockett. He's probably going to have another 1,000-yard year. Great for him. But, we've only got 2 legit wide receivers on this roster. Let's go get the third one and have those weapons. I wouldn't be opposed to that pick for sure. All right, let's talk about pick number 20.
Yeah, so you mentioned defensive line. This is other than Carter and Anderson at the top, the guys that will be in play at 5. This isn't a great defensive line draft in round 1. And what I see is that when you get down to 20, you've got a couple of guys that will be absolutely in play. One will be Brian Breesy out of Clemson, and the other one will be Kalijah Cansey out of Pittsburgh. Cansey draws a lot of Aaron Donald comps because he's from Pittsburgh and short and very explosive. I think that's doing Cansey a disservice, because if you're trying to compare him to compare anybody to Aaron Donald, then they're not going to look good in that comparison. So, but that's what people are talking about with him. Breesy's a bigger guy, more of a nose tackle, but both are very, very good players who would be an instant upgrade on Seattle's defensive line.
I think there's 2 players that Seattle stays at 5'4", and that would be CJ Stroud and Will Anderson. I really do see them moving off if those players are not there. The same thing can be said for 20. 20, they can drop back 5 or 6 picks and pick up a early 3rd round pick for doing that. And I do see them kind of moving around in this area. They could also move up if they wanted to. There's a couple other players that might be in play at, say, pick 26, 27 would be Mozzie Smith, a guy that everyone's kind of projected, or you see a lot of mock drafts. He's there at 37. In reality, a guy that's, on Feldman's freak list at number 1 overall, there for a reason. Guys covet that. He's 237 pounds and can move around and play like a 3-tech.
337 pounds.
337. Yeah. And so a guy like that just does not grow on trees. And so this is the point in the draft where you kind of go get guys. You might reach a hair or whatever, but at the end of the day, you got the player that you want. DeJuan Jones is a player that they've had a private 30, one of the 30 visits that they've got for draftable players. He's one of those guys, the huge offensive tackle at 6'8", 300 and however many pounds.
Are there any guys
with a 90-inch wingspan?
Are there any guys at 20 though that, just like you said at 5, there's 2 guys that they would stay for and not move back? Are there guys at 20 that if they're there, you absolutely have to take them?
I think so. Well, I think that you take Nolan Smith. I'd mentioned him moving up possibly and taking him at 11 or whatever. But if he's sitting there at 20, I think that they may become enamored with Brian Breesy just from his grit perspective and overcoming adversity and the upside that he provides there. Kalijah Clancy might be a guy that they're enamored with, even though he's short in stature. He's a tenacious guy and a great player. Maybe they like a guy like Zay Flowers or something, or Quentin Johnson falls to them at 20. There are a few, really. I mean, it gets really interesting as far as player fits there and just overall big board value. There's a lot to like. The
guys I was looking at in answering that same question would have been Lucas Finesse out of Iowa, who I think is going to go.
I like him as a prospect.
10, 11, 12, somewhere in there. I think if he happens to fall to 20, I think they run to the podium for that one. And other than that, the other guy is it would be Anthony Richardson, the quarterback out of Florida. Because if they go defense up at the top of the draft, everybody knows they need a quarterback. And Anthony Richardson is such this crazy prospect of athleticism and speed, power, size, arm strength, everything. But you got to.
But he's not ready.
You got to teach him how to. You're right, but he's not ready.
Right.
You have to have Gino for the next 2 years.
Exactly. Right.
And so I could see them just saying, that's too much to pass up. That's a potential franchise quarterback, and not having to pick in the top 10 to get him.
Would you do the same thing with Will Levis?
Oh, if Will Levis is sitting there, that's a no-brainer. Will Levis is by far the better prospect. And like Will Levis today, right now, and has like immense upside. Now he's not going to be the running quarterback that Richardson is, because guys like Richardson are incredibly rare. I mean, the last person to come out of the draft with his kind of athleticism was Cam Newton, and so that's different. But Will Levis is a better prospect. He's much more advanced in terms of being able to read defenses. He's more accurate. He's more poised in the pocket. He just has a lot more ready to go than Richardson.
We've talked a lot about Quentin, and we'll get on to the next picks. We've talked a lot about Quentin Johnson being favored by us and projected in mock drafts that we've done recently. But what about Najigma from Ohio State? Kind of a slot guy, but ran like a 4.5 240 at his pro day. Not quite as agility wise, testing and straight line speed where you wanted him to be, but he gets the job done on tape for sure. How about a guy like that?
See, a guy that gets the job done but doesn't move the needle has a harder time getting the job done at the next level, because now you're playing against cornerbacks that are more athletic than you. Can you still get separation when the guy is quicker and faster than you are? And I don't know. I tend to not lean in that direction. I would rather go get Jordan Addison, who is Much more explosive, more an elite prospect, even though if he's smaller, but you're still talking about a slot guy. Jordan Addison is going to be an elite slot receiver.
At pick 20, is there a player that you would literally throw your shoe at the TV because they picked him? Like just a shocker, just a like out of left field, unbelievable. This is crazy.
Honestly, Kylie Ringo.
Yeah, I can see Pete Carroll fall in love with that profile, but he's not a great corner as far as his coverage skills are concerned.
His ball skills are bad, but he's a great athlete, but he doesn't get his head around. He's in position, but the guy makes the catch anyway far too often. And I hate that. So I'd probably throw my shoe at a TV over that one. Or maybe
I could see a sneaky guy like Zay Flowers sneak up there.
Yeah, but that's the thing is I wouldn't throw my shoe for that. Who's the giant offensive tackle out of Ohio State?
Not Broderick Jones.
The other one.
Dwan Jones.
Dwan Jones?
Dwan Jones.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what I was thinking. Yeah. Who's like 360 pounds, offensive tackle. I'd probably throw my shoe at a TV for him. Not that he's a bad player. It's just Seattle's got both their starters at offensive tackle, and neither of those guys need to move inside. So you're using a first round pick on a guy that probably won't play. Because
or plays on the outside, and you'd have to kick one of your best right tackle prospects in the entire NFL over into the on the inside.
Yeah, because Jones can't move. Like he's not a guy that's going to move inside. Right. He's going to be a tackle. And so I would hate that pick.
The one pick I would hate, it would be Emmanuel Forbes. People have him projected to go into the back end of the first round, early second round at 6'1", 166 pounds. Yeah, the guy runs a 4.35, but come on. There's a spot for him in the NFL, I think, but I don't want that. I just don't want that. Okay. So, Seattle then picks at 37 overall, the pick from Denver. 37 is an interesting spot. Team could go a number of different ways. There's certain players that are still on the board that I think Seattle runs up to the podium for. Zay Flowers is one. Osiris Torrance possibly. A guy like Darnell Washington, the big huge tight end from Georgia, might be in play. Jalen Wyatt, wide receiver from Tennessee. Mozzie Smith, obviously we've talked about Mozzie Smith a lot on this show. As a defensive tackle, just an athletic freak at that spot at 334 pounds. How are you feeling about pick 37? Is that a spot where Seattle could move up to grab a guy that's falling at the back end of the first round or early second round? Maybe they take that pause in the draft between rounds, come back the next day, move up for a player or trade back.
I think you could, because I think if you have a guy like Bijan Robinson fall, which I would call it falling, but everyone else would. A running back, and nobody takes him, which would be smart because you don't take running backs early in round one. But he's available there, and you could move up to 33. Or actually, if you're dropping and you're looking at pick 32, so rather than waiting overnight and whatever, you're looking at that last pick of the first round, and you're like, if we move up and take him there, then that gives us that 5th-year option plus a franchise tag that gives you 6 years of team control on a rookie contract, which is usually about what running backs, that's their lifespan. You never have to give them a second contract, and you get an elite player.
I have another player for you, Michael Mayer. So nobody's talking about Michael Mayer as a prospect. I just don't hear a lot of buzz about him as a tight end. His testing numbers are average at best. Why. He does everything, well? But he does everything pretty strongly. He's a good blocker, one of the best blockers in this draft. He also catches the ball, moves the chains. He's a chain mover. He's not an elite in the red zone because of his size, but he just does everything really well. And people are going to love him. He interviews well. He's a leader. He's a captain on, Notre Dame's offense, etc.
Why would you take him in round 1 though? What's special about
Name
him?
me a projection that has him going anywhere else.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying convince me that those projections are right.
Yeah.
He's not I'm not saying he's a bad player. Good player. Love to have him in a Seahawks uniform, but I'm not using a first round pick on a guy that's good but not great, or great but not special, and just doesn't have that upside. If he falls a little bit and he's there at 37, or if they've picked up a pick somewhere in the 40s, sure, take him, go for it. But I'm not taking him with a first round pick.
So, okay. So what's your best, overall scenario at 37 for the Seahawks?
Mozzie Smith. Yep. If Smith is gone, Osiris Torrance. And if Torrance is gone, I'm reaching a little bit to get John Michael Schmitz out of Minnesota.
To make sure you get him.
To make sure you get it. He's worth getting. He's worth using an earlier pick than you think you might, in order to make sure you get the best center in the draft.
Could have done this a couple years ago. So at 52, let's go to 52, the second pick, our native pick in round number 2. There seems to be a lot of options depending on how the board falls. We could have had taken a quarterback at this point, interior defensive line, an edge rusher, linebacker might come into play, cornerback. There's a lot of ways that you could go. If you didn't take a quarterback early and Hendon Hooker is sitting there at 52, that could be in play, I think, for the Seahawks as a guy you could sit for a year. In fact, that might be the ideal situation for both Hendon Hooker and the Seahawks, to have him go there and sit behind Geno Smith for a year.
Yeah, he would definitely be in play there if they don't go quarterback early. If they don't get Schmitz before this, Steve Avila, the center out of TCU, should definitely be in play. He's the second best center in this draft. Jack Campbell, the linebacker, who is just that old school, super tough thumper middle linebacker who just is a tackling machine and makes people pay for getting in his space. Zach Charbonnet, the running back, would be an interesting one at that spot, because that would give the Seahawks the depth they need there. And then there's some defensive linemen that are in this area too, such like Tuli Tuipulotu. Lotu. Yeah. I screwed that up.
USC.
Yep. Who I think that would be a good fit there. Atabarwe out of Northwestern. I think he's going to go before that, but if he drops in there, you've got to go after a guy like that.
White, really athletic, super athletic edge out of Georgia Tech.
And then Julius Brents, who's a cornerback / safety / everything. Super athlete, can play free safety, has the speed to do all of the free safety things, the size and agility to play corner, can play slot, play outside, and play free safety. Just kind of an uber athlete. And I think he would also be in play in that range.
I think they're really going to like Cody Mock, the interior offensive lineman out of North Dakota State. Keanu Benton, the defensive lineman, if they miss out on Mozzie Smith or they pass on Jalen Carter, Keanu Benton would be a guy that they would look at in this range as well. Tyreek Stevenson, the cornerback out of Miami. Derek Hall, the edge player, has got a lot of speed there. Julian Brents. DeHalen Henley, linebacker out of Washington State, Keith. It's not going to be there. Not going to be there at 83.
Nope.
You pick at 52. There could be some movement there between those picks. Seattle may move up a little bit, may move back. They could move up from 83 though to go target somebody at in the 70 range if somebody's falling. DeHalen Henley might be a player like that. Joe Tippmann, if they miss out on Schmitz, they still need a center. He's a little bigger at 325 pounds, but nonetheless, Luke Weipler, another center prospect from Ohio State. in that 70 range might not be there until 83, too early to pick at 52. They might be some maneuvering in there.
Yeah.
What would be your strategy? How would you address that? You start with 10 picks. You don't necessarily need more than 10 to finish the draft, but maybe you do.
10 is kind of the ideal number. But I don't know. It depends on what happens at the top of the draft, because if the two guys that you want at 5 are gone and you move down and you pick up a couple extra picks, at this point, okay, that means you didn't get what you wanted at the top of the draft. You need to get what you want here in the middle, in the second and third round. And so using those extra picks that you got to move up and get a guy that you really like, that you don't want to see drop below, and get a guy like Keon White at edge, or Julius Brents at cornerback, Cody Mock at center guard. I would move up then, because like I said, 10 is kind of the ideal number, maybe 11. But you don't want 12, 13, because you typically don't have that many spots on your roster. And while not necessarily every draft pick that you take, you're going to get them into camp and be like, wow, this is completely exactly what we wanted. You're also going to have undrafted free agents in there too. So I would say if you get that 10, 11 range, you're good. If you've got more picks than that, use them to move up. Find a guy. If there's a guy that's falling just a little bit and you don't think they're going to fall quite to your next pick, move up and get them.
Yeah,
that's what they did with DK Metcalf, and was very wise to do that.
So they've got a pick in the third round at 83, and they've got a pick at 123 overall. There's a lot of prospects in this range that feel needs. You're possibly not looking at somebody that comes in and immediately starts, but you're looking for somebody that's going to be able to make your roster, as well as play special teams at a high level and be a nice rotation piece. So you're looking at the linebacker, you're looking at safeties, maybe wide receiver. Are there any other spots, the interior line, offensive line and defensive line as well?
Running back.
Running back. Sure. That's a great spot.
Kendre Miller, Tank Bigsby are in this range. Two guys that I like at running back to come in.
Rashawn Johnson. Yeah.
Rashawn Johnson too. Maybe Chase Brown if he drops, if you're looking for a guy with that athletic profile. Some people will say Devin Arcane. I think he's too small, but yeah, I mean, this is a good running back range. And I think at 83, that's positional value, because you're getting a guy that can make an impact on your team in year one, but you're not overspending on a running back that's going to wear down after a year or two.
Yeah, definitely. Guys like Byron Young, the Tennessee 294-pound, and in a 3-4 would be a guy that they would look at. A guy like Darius Rush, a bigger corner from South Carolina, would be in play. Tyjae Spears, second running back, might be available in this range. A guy like Tanner McKee, a quarterback, Keith, if they miss out on Hendon Hooker, if they miss out at the top of the draft, they still want to add a player that they can evaluate on their roster in 2023. Would they take a look at a Tanner McKee?
Yeah, I mean, they might. I wouldn't. This is in this range in the third round, you're looking at getting guys that can come in and start and play. And going and getting your third string quarterback isn't helping your roster win.
I agree. I thought I'd raise the thing, but I agree with you. I think it would be a waste.
I think it would be a waste. So
interesting. So now strategy wise, how do you fill out the rest of your roster?
Well, and then after that, I think at this point you're looking at highest upside, right? Because you've got 5 or 6 players that you think are going to come in and compete and make an impact on your roster in year one. After that, you're looking at upside, you're looking at athleticism, you're looking at guys that maybe there's a hole in their game, but you can coach it and fill that in. Tariq Woolen is kind of the ultimate example of that, where UTSA, right? And was where he's coming out of, and everyone's like, well, he doesn't even know how to play the position, but he was so athletic that they couldn't keep him off the field, right from the very first preseason game. And, now then you go you go down from there. You don't have to look for that extreme of an example, but guys that can make that impact maybe in year 2, and come in. That's kind of what I look at there. There are a few players that don't fit that mold in these later rounds that I would still take. A guy like Michael Wilson, wide receiver out of Stanford, because he could come in and be your 3rd or 4th wide receiver on day 1 and therefore make an impact. So it's kind of like what we were talking about with earlier picks. But yeah, I'm looking at super high upside, and it might be high upside, low floor, right? A guy that could come in and either he's going to hit and be great, or he's not, and he's going to fall completely off your roster. Zach Kuntz, the tight end out of
I'm falling in love with that prospect as a guy that if he's there at 151 or even 123, that's something that Seattle will do. Even though they're loaded right now at tight end, you're kind of drafting at this range. You're drafting for your future as well.
Mm-hmm. You're filling out your roster. You're getting yourself some depth for this year, but you're not getting guys that you expect to start week 1 and make a huge impact. You've got those guys. You've done that. Now you're looking at guys that can make an impact on special teams in year 1, can be a backup, maybe come in later in the season if there's an injury and make an impact then, but definitely has the upside to be a really good player in year 2 or year 3. That's what you're looking for here. Drafting guys with middling athleticism in these mid to late rounds, day 3 picks, I think is kind of a waste, because you're getting guys that don't have the skills and athleticism to play now, but they've also don't have the upside to play later. So what are you getting? You're getting a back of the roster guy who will never improve, and never improve enough to make an impact on your as a starter. So I think you've got to go athletic guys down in this range, and for the most part, that's what John Schneider has done. He's gone with the more athletic players in the late rounds because he kind of has the same mindset where, why are you drafting a guy if you don't think that down the road he can become a starter for you?
I agree. Yeah, he does that. And it seems to work out. I mean, last year's a great example. I like all sorts of players in this, we've been playing around with learning about the prospects and going through mock drafts and evaluating position groups for a long time now. And there is a lot of talent here. You just have to be in a position to find it. Bryce Ford Wheaton is a high upside guy. Jackson Kirkland, the tackle from Washington, it'd be a great fit on somebody's team. Jalen Redmond had an outstanding combine showing extreme athleticism at the defensive line position. Daniel Scott, the safety out of California, is a great pick. Somebody's going to fall in love with Ricky Stromberg and the way that he has the tenacity and the grit there in the center position. Dorian Thompson Robinson is a prospect that I think is going to go higher than some people expect. There's a lot of talk that he's going to be available in the 6th round. I don't think so. I think he's going to end up going in the 4th or 5th round in this draft.
We'll see. I think he's old enough, and he's like a 6-year starter, and four and a half of those years are bad. And then he came on and played really well this last year, but he's also not a young prospect by any means.
And Stinson Bennett, same. I hear rumors that he's having a great offseason and private workouts as well as the pro day at Georgia, and that's a guy that's moving up. Jose Ramirez, the edge player out of Michigan, had a fantastic combine, is available in the 200 range. Jared Clark, big, huge defensive lineman out of Coastal Carolina, is one-dimensional as a player, strictly a run-stuffing nose tackle type guy. If he was in a 3-4 or in a 4-3, he would be, one of your, interior guys playing 0-1 nose tack. And so you can get guys like that. Cameron Young, tremendous upside as far as athleticism is concerned out of Mississippi State. You're right. Those are the type of players you're looking for to fill out the back end of your roster and play special teams, make your roster, hopefully, and if not, practice squad type guys. So anything else you want to talk about today?
Well, is there anyone out of these late picks that we're talking about right now that you think that if they're still sitting there in round 7, you have to take them because you don't want them to reach undrafted free agent status where they could go anywhere? Like absolute priority guys.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah, there's one guy. Let me see if I can find him. Hold on. It's like a guy like Trey Palmer, the wide receiver out of Nebraska, or Yaya Diaby, started out in the 7th round range. I think he's moving up because of his combine, but if he drops for whatever reason, a guy like that would be outstanding. 7th round range. Interesting. DeMarco Halams, the safety out of Alabama, just comes from a great program as a strong safety. He's going to be an in the box safety for you. That would be interesting. Jose Ramirez is an interesting guy, Eastern Michigan, just has all the athleticism in the world, a little undersized. Jared Clark, a big, huge guy. I wouldn't mind having him come out of the draft for sure.
There's a couple guys that are viewed in this range. That Gerard Clark out of Coastal Carolina at defensive tackle, and Cameron Young out of Mississippi State at defensive tackle, and Drake Thomas, linebacker out of NC State. All of these are guys that are viewed in this late 7 or undrafted free agent range. If they're there, and you've got a pick near the end of the draft, I take them because I don't want them getting to undrafted free agency where they're going to go sign with someone else. I want them in my camp. Because I think they can I think they will make a roster.
That's the benefit of having that pick 237. It's right close to the end of the draft. It's a flyer. You're taking a flyer on a player. Your most favorite undrafted rookie free agent player you can take there.
Yeah, someone who you think, okay, they're most likely going to be an undrafted player, but there are traits that they have, things that they do well that are going to be good enough they're going to make a roster. Go grab them.
Yeah.
And you go grab them there.
I could also see Seattle trading that pick, just trading it for a future 6th round pick. I mean, stuff like that, depending on what they did earlier. They walk out of the draft with 11 or 12 players. They don't need that pick necessarily. They could apply it towards the future.
Yep. Agreed.
Interesting. All right. Let's get out of here. Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NWC Hawk. The show is at Hawks Playbook, favorite podcast platforms and YouTube. Hit that subscribe button, all that good stuff. Until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWC Hawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.